As you can see behind me, I got 2 deer hanging, and I figured I would tape this because I wanted to point out some key little tricks that I do when I'm butchering at home. If you guys don't butcher at home, I would encourage you to do so. If you do so, then you know how your meat was treated, where it came from, and you're going to be able to make specialized cuts in specialized portions doing it yourself. Now, I'm no expert, okay? I was raised by a trained chef who taught me how to cut up my own deer probably 30 years ago, and I did it the traditional kind of American sportsman's way, where everything was just plain old chops, steaks, ground, and then roast. I've gotten into the last few years to doing stuff a little more special. It doesn't take much, excuse me, it doesn't take much to do this a little bit better. And if you got the time and space, and you can see it doesn't require a lot of space, but I would encourage you to do it. It's a funny thing, I had only killed 2 deer this whole season. It's not been the best hunting season for me. And in the last 3 days, I got 2 other ones. One I got off of an ag tag, which is a depredation tag. They issue tags in Pennsylvania here where farmers get extra tags to knock down the deer that are beating up their crops. And then the other one in the back, I'll show you the carcass later, but I actually got that last night with a Ford F-150 and screwed up my grill. I hit it, killed it, and I was like, well, I might as well use it too. So I ended up with hunting all season, got 2 deer, and then in the last few days got 2 more, and then the family will be more than good with deer this year. I encourage you guys to start cutting up your own deer, and I encourage you not to do just the traditional steaks, chops, roasts, and grind. I want to show you as well some things that I learned in my trade, and that's just prep work and setting yourself up that'll make it go smoother. It doesn't require a whole lot of tools or anything like that. But you do need some to make it go better. I see people who are boning out meat with hunting knives, and that's like using a trim hammer to frame. And I see people who are, you're not necessarily using the right, I don't say it that way because I was the same way, but the right tool helps. Just put it that way. Let me walk you through how I'm set up. And it all has to do with flow and how I'm handed and how I move the meat around while I'm cutting. First, I'll talk about the height of your work surface. What I got here is an industrial, 30 by 30 tabletop, stainless steel. It's countertop height. It's 34, 35 inches tall, which once you put a cutting board on it, it ends up being 36 inches tall. Perfect height for cutting. Now this is just a lifetime folding table from Walmart. You notice I got it lifted to comfortable height. I've cut a lot of meat bent over, and that sucks. So this is the legs of those tables. You can see that I've slipped a piece of 1-inch copper over top of it. Now I don't advocate using 1-inch copper, but I'm a contractor. I had it laying around. By the time I added that copper to those 4 legs, the copper addition probably ended up costing more than the table. But you can do it with PVC or anything else. And do some simple math, figure out how high you need to lift that table. Then you can take a cheap Walmart table, lift it up to countertop height when you need it, and then you need it for dinner or whatever the rest of the time, you can just take those legs off. They slip right over top of these If your legs are angled like mine, it'd be worthwhile to pay attention to the angles of the legs so they sit a little flatter, like that one. So that's the first thing to get stuff at a convenient height to work. Lift your table up. I've seen people, a group of old neighbors that I hunt with, they lifted them up on cinder blocks and it worked just fine. If you have those laying around, use whatever you got. You're smart enough to figure it out. Next, I want to talk about how the workflow should go. All right, the carcasses are over there. I can't move them. But what I'm going to do is, because I'm right-handed, my tool will be operated in my right hand. I'll be working from this side of the table. You got soapy, sanitized water to clean up the tallow and the grease and blood and meat. Where that tub is, that's where I'll cut these into smaller portions. And then slide down the table. Again, the tools are in my right hand. I'll use the cutting block there to make my other cuts. And then I've got hotel pans, full-size hotel pans. There's one there on the table, and then you can see sitting on the cooler right there. There's another one at a lower level, and then there's a half pan there too. I'm going to use those to put my steaks, roasts, and everything in. And then, so there's one trick I want to show. Anytime you're cutting on a cutting board, whether it's your countertop at home or whatever, there's a tendency for this to slide around. There's a little trick you can do. I learned it when I was working in a kitchen. Wet a rag, and then you throw it. If you wet it and throw it down, and then put it on your surface, then this has less tendency to move and slide around on you. It basically sticks it to that surface. I didn't mention it. Why I use metal hotel pans? Number one, they're not plastic. I am not a fan of plastic, but the metal pan, it doesn't hold on to the tallow as well, or at least I found it doesn't hold on to the tallow. Sometimes you get those plastic tubs or any of those totes, and you get tallow or fat in there. It gets hard to wash out because they're two non-polar objects that they stick together better than metal. And a fat is easier to clean off. Next thing I should talk about, again, I have a tub of soapy water. I'm going to slip that under that table. That way it's not in the way of where I'm going to portion out the animal. But some things you need. Again, we're talking about tools. And you can go at this slowly. And you don't need these. You don't need all of these, but they sure are helpful to make the job go easier. One, and I didn't used to use one of these, but I started to after I started cutting and poking myself enough. I have a chainmail glove. You can get these off of Amazon. Of course, I have a steel rod. As far as the knives, the most important one, and if you were going to buy one, the most important knife you should have is a boning knife. These are all Victorinox. I didn't go out and buy these at one time. I asked for them for Christmas presents. Like the last 2 or 3 years, all my gifts have been processing gifts, like these nice sets and saw wrapping paper dispensers and tape dispensers and a good heavier grinder, and then I got a sausage stuffer and stuff. I asked for them for Christmas. You're going to start out by yourself. Get yourself a steel rod and get yourself a boning knife. If I had to, you wanted to add something else, I'd get a staking knife. Again, these are Victorinox. They're not the cheapest things, but they're good and they're worth it. And then the last thing, which I just picked up because I used to just cut the bones in my chops and racks. I used to just cut them with this saw. I'm going to use the chopper now. I just got that as another present. And then a bone saw. Oh, one last thing. I've got an old garbage bag or garbage container. All my scraps go in that. I save my scraps for my dogs. I feed them to my hound dogs. If you notice, my scraps, I'm going to be left-handed. The scraps go in with my left hand while my tool is in my right hand. So it's all about a workflow and having decent tools. But more than a rifle, more than clothing, if you care about what you're eating and the way it's handled, I think you should invest in good tools like this. You'll use them for the rest of your life. All right. This is a deer I killed, I don't know, 3-4 days ago. I appreciate traditional ways of doing things and, deboning them in the woods and stuff like that and getting home and butchering them. Number one, if you talk about safety and workflow, doing a lot of this stuff in the woods is very dangerous. No, I shouldn't say very dangerous, but it's dangerous. I've done it several times, cutting up a lot of animals. You're bent over, you're hunched over. A lot of times it's dark, you're working by a headlamp, and you'll nick yourself. You're not in a good position to work. So if you can, it's best to get them out whole. I'll do a video later on basically 3 ways to get them out whole. But even if you're hunting large game, it would be best to get it out with the bones. Now, that seems, actually, let me slow down here. I'm anxious to get to working because I got to get stuff done quickly. But you see today, and I'll go into another video, but of why you should be doing it, or why I advocate for it. But you see a lot of people doing the gutless method. Traditions happen because people tried it for eons to get the meat taken care of and tasting the best they could for a long time. I do gut my animals. Even if I'm going to quarter them in the woods, I gut them. And the reason I gut them is that grass bag and the gut and everything, that holds the most moisture, which then acts as a furnace inside of here. An elk is going to take you almost around 2 hours to break down. And the whole time, if you're taking that long to break it down, you have that furnace in here that's applying heat to this whole carcass. And if you're able to pull that gut and lung out and all the entrails out, you can get that furnace away from that animal as quickly as possible. So it reduces the heat quicker. That's the first reason I gut. The second reason I gut is, and I'm no doctor, but you're able to look at the not the vitals, but the organs of the animal to tell whether they're healthy or not. There's a few diseases, one of which is tuberculosis, that elk and deer carry. If you don't look at that lung cavity and that set of lungs, you're never going to know if that elk had TB. And it may just be the start of it. The other things are injuries. And you'll normally see bruising, but sometimes, and I've had it happen on 2 animals, where they got hit with a vehicle or they were in a fight and got harpooned basically in the rib cage. That kind of healed over on their hide, but inside their rib cage, they had a huge abscess that if you're not savvy to that animal may have started to go septic, or sepsis, and it is starting to get blood poisoning, and you never looked inside of there, you don't know that. And both those animals were running around fairly healthy, that, just by looking at the way it's acting, you may not have been able to tell. And both those animals had bad meat. That when you open that up, the interior of it stunk. And if you don't open it up, you're never going to know that. The other reason is I eat the organs. I eat heart and lung, or not heart and lung, heart and liver. And then you can inspect the liver to see if it might have a disease or anything like that too. And then honestly, I enjoy anatomy and physiology, and I like to see the effects of my arrow or bullet and where everything lies inside this cavity, and whether these shots, the shot that I made was good or bad, and what it did damage-wise to the animal. So some of it's scientific, well, all of it's scientific, but some of it is for tradition. I enjoy gutting them. Some of it's practical. I want to check the health of it, and I also want to eat some of the organs inside there. And the last practical reason, especially if you're on a large animal, is it gets that furnace out of that animal, so you got a little bit more time to cut up what you need to. All right, you notice this thing's missing a rib cage. I shot this animal on the opposite of what you're seeing. It was quartering to me. I hit it. I came out a little further back than I wanted to, and when I did that, the shock, it went through the liver and diaphragm, and it hit the gut and the grass bag. And I cut this out because at the time, meat was going to be wasted anyway, so I trimmed that out. The other thing I did, because I knew that cavity was compromised, is I diluted vinegar and water and washed out this cavity. Don't do it with just water. That'll create heat, and it gives a place for bacteria to grow. But if you add an acid like vinegar or something like that, it almost is an antiseptic, and you can clean out this cavity really nice. And then, you can't see it, But I took the tenderloins out too. When you're hanging a deer like this, or not going to hang an elk like this, but the tenderloins, I took them out, and they go all the way up into this haunch. I took them out because they tend to dry, which is annoying, and you end up trimming more off. So I took them out right away, wrapped them, and froze them, which is another reason, again, to gut. I see people reaching in here, and I know you can do it, but again, it's safety, ease of work, and working sensibly or efficiently. It's easier to get to these tenderloins with those guts out instead of trying to cut in here and reach in. So it's my opinion, my way I do it, and probably take the neck roast off, shoulders, loin, and then get the hindquarters off. And I'm going to do them as it's hanging. I'm not going to crowd up my workspace. Hey, if you're liking these videos, please like and subscribe. My schedule is irregular, and that'll get you alerted whenever the videos come out. Okay, another reason to cut this up, I don't know if I mentioned it because I can't remember what I said. You can portion it out, not just quality control, but you can portion it how you want. I got a family of 3 now, so any multiple of 3 is what I want to cut these in. And that determines, I'm mentioning that because that determines what rib I'm going to cut and how I'm going to remove the shoulders and stuff. For me, I'm going to go between the 6th and 7th rib. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. 13, 12, 10. My 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So then what I'll do is just connect those in here. That lets me see outside where I'm going to cut. I'm going to flip to the other side, make my cut, and then hit it with a saw. Okay, there's several ways I can do this, and all right, just thinking through what I'm going to do here. I'm going to seam off this shoulder and then work from there. A lot of people will just cut this off and grind it. I'll grind most of it, but there's 2 cuts in here that I really want that are excellent eating. I would say, if you can see from that angle, that when you cut here, you got to be careful of the top portion. A lot of people just hack into it and cut that. That's ruin a good cut. That will ruin a good cut of meat. There's a nice cut in there inside where the top of the ribs, the eye of it. Now what I'll do is I'm going to cut the brisket off, or the ribs, and I want to make, it's kind of a bad cut there, but I want to make some chops, bone-in chops, or a roast or a rack out of this. And typically what you do is you look at the eye of the meat, and you go twice that, and that's where you end up cutting the ribs. And I'm just going to cut it straight down through to the neck. Now this cutting ribs with a saw is not the easiest thing to do. So there's the ribs I want. Yeah, I miscounted on that side. Oh well. But that's it portioned out, and I'm going to start cutting these, getting the meat out of each of these that I want. In this shoulder blade, I won't get a big one off this deer, but I want to get my my flat irons out of here. This is, you know, that'd be the way the deer was standing. They come off of the larger portion of these shoulders. Okay, and there's the flat irons, and they came off the wide side of the shoulder blade. The rest of it I'm just going to cut off for burger or grinding it. Alright, so flat irons are in there, and then again, this is all, I'll trim this up and make it in small portions so I can grind it, but that's going to get ground. The other thing about this is you can figure out what you want in each season. Like, nobody really wants a roast in the middle of summer, right? Make burgers for summer or roast for winter, depending on when, how, and what you killed. All I'm doing right now is trying to get down to those flat irons. Now with these flat irons, this is the difficult part. There's a seam of sinew or blue skin. You got to go down that to separate these two flat irons. And you just work along trying to keep your knife as flat as possible to get them. And that's one. So again, this came from the broad side of the shoulder, but that's the skin you got to fillet down basically. Now I'll flip it over. Oh my gosh. I'll flip it over and cut the other side off. If you've never fiddled with this and taken your flat irons out, I highly encourage you. It's a part of the deer that does a lot of work, but these are still tender. So there's 2 flat irons. You'll notice I tug and pull a lot, and that's just to keep the muscle groups together without me cutting through it with a knife. Okay, that's where the flat irons will come from. This, get the glands out and stuff. Fat to the dog, meat to the grinder. If you watching the way I'm tossing and stuff, you can see that being set up properly helps a whole lot. Okay. You see the skin right there. I'm gonna just fillet right down it to get this outer layer off. In here, again, there's that tenon and blue skin that starts. I don't know if I can't film on the other side, so this is difficult. It's not perfect, but pretty good. So I got my 4 flat irons. Matter of fact, I might as well do it now. Trim them. I try not to mess with these too much as far as trimming them, but you know, when you're doing it, you want them about the same size with the same thick. Of course, they end up being the same thickness, but you want them about the same size. I don't want to trim them too much because I enjoy them too much. The point to it is, it's worth the trouble ahead of time to get those out. This is that shank that I'm going to make into a roast, and I do kind of for looks trim this up with the bone in. I don't know, kind of reminds me of Old English Cooking or the Grinch or whatever. I like the bone on there, just it adds flavor, number one, but I think it kind of looks cool. There will be the roast. Once I got it here, I might as well clean up the neck roast too. You know what? I'm going to grind this. I usually make it into a roast, but it's pretty dry. So that's where the head was attached. It's the axis and atlas right there. And I'm just going to go down the backbone and take the meat off the bone here. Alright, thinking about what I want to do here. No, I'm cutting out stuff that dried in here. It's going to go to the dog. I think what I'm going to do here is cut down. I'm going to make 3 I'm going to cut across there and get 3. I'm going to make 2 3-rib racks. And to get those out, it's a little awkward. Cutting right along the spine. Probably saw me going real slow there. I don't want to ruin the eye of this meat. So I just wanted to cut through the ribs and then take it through the ribs and down the backbone, right to the top of the neck or back, and do the same thing on this side. And I'm left with those blades. Actually, the dog is left with those blades. And then you can see in here there's an eye of that meat. I'm going to take everything that's not in that eye. All I'm doing is exposing that eye of that tendon or whatever holds up the neck. Cut that off. At this point, I'm going to go eye and double, and I'm going to chop right there. And then I'm going to make these kind of fancy as well. Alright, now what I want to do is kind of French trim them. Now this cut has a little bit more tendons in it, and this muscle has worked a little bit more up towards the head. I want to get any sinew and stuff off, cause anybody any grief with their teeth. I took what was just an ordinary, most people were going to grind it, and I made it into something a little bit more than just ground burger. Takes more time, but most everybody appreciates it. I will say there's no point in making these cuts if you don't start learning how to cook them. So why do it? And so that you can have, again, I know people are like, good gravy, just cut and grind and wrap this thing. But, you put something like that on the plate, something like that on the plate. You got family, guests, you change your attitude about it. Wild game. And then the other thing is, I'll be honest, I got the time to do this right now. If you don't, and I have as well, when I don't have time, I've got a bunch of them down. I don't, you got to judge it. Okay, this is the remainder of that that shoulder. Up in here I've got, you can even see how it's all separated. That's more tendons and stuff in there. Not necessarily the nicest thing to make a roast out of, and remember I said I had enough roast. So I'm just going to get it off the bone and grind the rest of this. You don't have to be an expert to do it. You just gotta do it. Do the rest later. Alright. This is the brisket, and I'm just gonna shave it off. And then grind it as well. Alright, since this is hanging, I'm going to take the loin off now. So, this is the pelvis, the pelvic girdle. Vertebrae, another vertebrae. I'm going to go right in there, and on this side you'll see that the knife is right at the intersection, the top side of the hams. I'm going to cut through that, both sides, connect it to guide my cut back here. Hopefully I do it better than the other side. Now I need to get a saw to get my loin off. Alright, this is oddly shaped because of the ribs. First thing I want to do is even those up. There's that first bad cut up by the shoulders. But I want to take the eye of the meat, double it, and go cut the ribs off. Eye of the meat, double, so right here, here, and then I just come straight back towards the loin. Now, I'm shaving this off. I grunted because there's so much tallow in these ribs that, and you can tell I try to get what I can, as much as I can, but this becomes, I mean, I'll do it, but it becomes a lot of extra work for very, very little reward. Alright, the bullet entered. That one. See how there's so much fat there, and this is the damaged side. I'm not going to mess with that. Alright, now here you got to figure out what you want to do. Remember I said I'm doing portions in multiples of 3, so I could either make 6 rib racks or 6 chops per side. I've got 7 ribs here, so I could make 14 bone-in chops. I could make 8 chops and a rack of 6 ribs. I'm just thinking what's the best portion of bones I want on this first. First, even this up since I cut it. I miscounted. We really like those racks of ribs, and I like bone-in chops too. I'm going to take one side and make bone-in chops, the other side I'm going to make a rack. That's the final answer. What I'm going to do here is I'll come to the last rib, cut down. Okay, this fatty thing here, this is where I'm going to go and basically take what the backstrap or the loin. There's a ridge bone in here that sometimes cause people to leave more meat on the bone than they should. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but you can see it. You can see it right here. You come down and then you hit a ridge and then got to go down again, up over top of it and down again to get the most meat out of there. That'd be where the tenderloins sit, and it's dried out. So I'm not going to take any of that other meat off of those ribs. So this is the loin portion of the back straps. Connected with a bunch of fat. All I'm doing here is trimming enough in order to get a hold of the loose skin. Deer needed to go on a diet. Chops, but yeah, not right now. Oh, dirtiest damn board I just cleaned. what do I say, a rack and then bone in. So I'm going to do the same thing like I did up on the rack on the front shoulder. Cut through half of this on each side of the spine. Cut through the ribs and then get over that ridge bone and fall down the side of the spine. Just get my tallow and my sinew off. Most people will just take this lower shank and grind it, but I like shank roast, so cut through the leg and then take the kneecap off. And then just for presentation purposes, I do trim these as well. Now you could, there's another muscle in there, you could cut that muscle out, but I leave them whole, cook them in a crock pot, and then trim some of this fat off. Get the bone dust off. Oh, shit. I almost screwed that up. I want to take and cut the rump off of this thing. So I'll angle towards, this is the tail. I'll angle towards the tail a little bit. Like an inch or so off of that and come and cut right here to get these rump steaks. And from here I'm just working this pelvic bone and the leg bone out of here. This isn't always the easiest thing to follow, but just keep your blade angled towards the bone, following it the whole time. You'll get it off pretty clean. This is another spot where when I had less experience, I would leave more meat than I wanted to on this pelvis. So, okay. Trim up all this fat. All I'm doing here is just seaming apart the major muscle groups. Take the kneecap out. That's the knuckle roast or the football roast. And here you got the sciatic nerve and some glands that you're not going to want to keep in this meat. You could probably see it right there. Some of that sciatic nerve, and then it's got lymph nodes and stuff in there too that you're not going to want. I'll trim it when I go further. Checking for lymph nodes. Alright, you got your top round and your bottom round. Take all these lymph nodes out. And the fat off. Now, I am trying to get, I had to change my card. Didn't realize that. I don't even know what was caught, so I'm just going to do that other hind quarter, and I'll do it the same as I did that one, which I got steaks out of the bottom round. I'm going to make a roast out of the top round, and then I cut the rump steaks out. Alright, rump roast again. Gonna go right in front of this, come out towards the tail. That'll be my rump steaks. And then this here will be all the cuts everybody knows. Knuckle roast, top round, bottom round, and then stuff in between. I start on the seam on the outside of the leg, and then just start trying to separate. This thing's stiff because of the temperature, but trying to separate the muscle pieces. And the reason I cut that pelvis like that is so I can get those rump steaks. Most people will just keep that haunch whole, take out the pelvis, and then I always tend to, you can do it, but you gotta be careful if you want rump steaks and stuff like that. You can screw it up fairly easy. Here's the football or knuckle roast, whatever you want to call it. I will make a roast out of that. It's got more tendons in it than I like, and by roasting it, I'm able to cook those out. Here I'm just separating the top and bottom rounds. Right in the seam of the bottom. I think this is so talked about I don't even feel like talking about it. It's just what everybody shows because it's what everybody concentrates on. Now, I don't know that they talk too much about it, but you got your sciatic nerve and then lymph nodes in here you got to get out between these two. And I'll seam it apart and then take that stuff out as well. The bottom round is, and then top round is here. Alright, on this bottom round, I'm going to do what I did on the last one. I'm going to take all the crap out of here. I'm actually going to separate, there's two muscle groups in here. This smaller muscle, I'm going to take it off and package it like I would a tenderloin and use it for like Wellington. Some may call this the salmon cut. It's that smaller muscle in that group. Probably noticed I trim pretty heavy, and that's because I've got people who want it that way. So again, I got family of 3 I'm feeding right now. And so I'm going to make 3 steaks. Now I could save those for more steaks, but I'm not going to. 3's enough. 3 4-ounce steaks is plenty. Most of us eat more than we should anyways. Some more of that sciatic I want to take out. Now this is the top round. I'm going to wrap this, tie it for a roast. Last time I did this, I made steaks out of this top round, and I didn't really like the way they turned out because there's a little bit more sinew and shit. Now I could parse part of that out. That's what I want. You make a steak out of this. I've got striation going this way and striation going this way in these muscles. Now I could take and part this off, but I'm going to make a roast out of it. Alright, this is the rump. When you take the bone out of this, I got to be careful. I would imagine others do too. If you go too wild, you'll lose some of the meat that you want in this. And then once you start cutting it into steaks, it gets... The steaks look weird. They don't look like your store-bought steak or whatever. They almost like kind of want to fall apart because I trim out a lot of the fat glands and skin, and this deer's fat. So I'm trying to use just the tip and stay right along the bone. The point of the hip is where it gets kind of funky. Can't do that.
I didn't know it was over.
Not bad. Alright. Again, when I start cleaning this up, this is where this gets a little loose, for lack of a better term. I got a bunch of dry skin on here still. I don't want to get off. And the fat. Now you could roll that and make a roast out of that rump. And the thing that's nice about this rump roast and flavor wise is it's basically the glute, the ass of the deer. Now it does a lot of work, but it has a lot of flavor, and cut up like this, it's really good. But again, I just had one there. You know, you got to get fat out. There's still some sinew and stuff in there, but these, you know, between the flat irons and these are what people, I think, waste. These rump steaks and the flat irons. Again, me pulling this apart, trying to get all this fat out of here, it kind of makes funky looking steaks, but squaring it up and then cutting my steaks. Again, I'm aiming for 3. 4 rump steaks. That's the deer. Cut up. What I'll do is when I'm done, I want to show you how I wrap down meat. Sounds stupid, but I want to show you a technique how to get nice stackable chunks of ground meat when you paper wrap, which I do. I'm going to clean it up, trim it up, and then start wrapping. The wrapping process is the same thing. It's all kind of about workflow. Alright, I'm going through cleaning this stuff up. One thing I didn't talk about was, well, you heard me say it, but I didn't. I'm going to demonstrate or show you what I do. But I wrap my roast. Didn't used to, but I do now. Practical reason is you wrap a roast, it'll let it cook evenly and keeps it sealed. Second reason is, you know, pretty much everything here is I'm trying to get the best presentation for guests and family as possible. And a roast that's wrapped is more presentable and looks nicer when you pull it out for Thanksgiving, Christmas, or whatever else. When people see it, it looks like more like a market animal. And then by tightening it, it allows me to square that roast up, which also allows it to cook more evenly. Alright, so you can get twine anywhere, butcher string, whatever you want to call it. There is a technique to, I don't know if this is just what I do. Alright, there's a technique to this though. Of course, you got your roll of string over here, and you want to start in the middle and work out. But the knot is probably, see how this is not, you know, I got a triangle right now. If I try to roast that, I've got thin parts of that triangle and everything else. So I can't even remember, it's a pseudo John Wayne knot I think I learned in the Army, but it's almost like a prusik, but I can't think of the name. But I go over, under, come over my other string, and then pull back through that loop. And that kind of makes like a locking knot. And it allows you to pull it tight, and then cut the string, and then do a half hitch around that string. So I just took my fingers, rotated them, and pull the original string through and pull it down, and then trim that off. And that goes in the trash, which isn't what my dogs want to eat. So I screwed that last knot up. I'll show it again. Over, under, over. Tighten it down, being careful not to squeeze it into an odd shape, and then cut enough string off. Make a, it's harder to show than it is to make a hitch in there. And that locks those strings down. Gives me a tighter roast that cooks evenly. You got to be careful when you're doing this. You can cut through the meat with this string, and I got pretty wide string. Once I have that roast cut up or tied up, I can then trim it. Matter of fact, I tie a little more than I wanted. I'm going to trim this right here to square it, and then on this side to square it up. Now, the reason I do my roast first is so this stuff becomes trim meat that I grind later on. Alright, so there's another roast. Alright, I'm about to get ready to wrap this, but I figured I wanted a final shot of everything. I finished grinding those trimmings, and I double ground it. I find a double grind is better now. And then instead of just grinding everything, I made up some stew meat, cube meat. I got my 2 shanks, my 2 football roasts that are tied, and I tied those shanks too just to try to keep stuff tight and, again, presentation. And there's my 2 top rounds wrapped. The roast, I got a 4-leg roast, 6 bottom round roast, 2 loins, back straps, whatever you want to call them, 2 of the salmon cuts from the bottom round. I'm going to use those for Wellington. There's that rack of ribs that I did. There's another rack of ribs I did from the shoulder area. Some chops, bone-in chops. And then, honestly, I think it's the best reason to do this for yourself is there's 4 flat irons and then 6 rump steaks. But that's it. And, you know, all done and finished. It takes some work, but it's good work. It's enjoyable. And you'll probably get butchers that could do it for you, but I mean, it's not an easy job, and people got to make money. It's about productivity. This takes a longer time to do, to make these special cuts. They taste pretty good. They look pretty good. If I could get all the fat off of them, they'd look even better. If you're going to pay a professional, you're going to pay. You can learn how to do it yourself. Obviously, you can see with some of my techniques, I'm no professional, but my dad started me into this when I was younger, and I was killing too many deer to pay for people to butcher them. And then, you know, I got into watching videos on YouTube, Scott Ray mostly. He's an Englishman who does a really nice job at cutting up deer over in England. In a minute here, I'll show you how I wrap all my meat. Real quickly, I wrap the meat in saran wrap, and then I wrap it in paper. And again, it's all about workflow from this direction to here. All right, the last thing I want to show is a technique, a trick, whatever you want to call it. I learned this from a neighbor's wife. She actually used it for jerky, and I just learned it this year. I don't know why. I'm slow in life, I guess. She used it for jerky, and I was like, I could use it for wrapping burger. I wrap all my meat in paper. Trying to get everything uniform when you're wrapping burger can be a pain in the ass. So I started doing what she did with jerky. This ain't rocket science, but maybe you haven't seen this before. Like I said, it took me 49 years of my life. So, alright, when I do this, I'm trying to get like 1 pound squares. And once I wrap these end up becoming easier than tubes or anything else to stack in the fridge or the freezer. I know a lot of guys use plastic tubes and bags and wraps, but I still don't.